Welcome to the TheForge tutorials Maya Masterclass. In today's video, we're gonna take a look at how to use the curve tools inside Maya. In our last video, we discussed how to create Nurb primitives, and you can also create Nurb surfaces with the help of curves. But before we get into that, let's discuss the Nurb curve tools. And you can access your Nurbs curve tools through your shelf here, or you can go to your create menu, and in your create menu, you have your Nurb primitives. And in your Nurb primitive menu, you have access to two Nurb curves. First one is your circle and then your square Nurb curve. Let's create a circle curve and I'm going to drag that on the grid. And this is how a basic Nurbs curve circle looks. And if we go into the components of this curve, we have all of the same options that we had for our Nurb surfaces. If we go into the control vertices, CV for short, we have the same control points available to us here, which we can manipulate by selecting them and moving them in our 3D space. And as you can see, we have made changes to our Nurbs curve. Let's delete this one for now and let's go back to our create menu. And in here, you also have access to your curve tools. I'm gonna tear this menu off and put it to the side. And in our curve tools, we have access to a bunch of different tools that you can use to create curves. The first one being our CV curve. And when we select our CV curve, the CV curve uses 4 points to create a curve. I'm gonna go into the orthographic view because I wanna draw a flat curve in the 3D space. So we have the CV curve selected, and when we first click on our grid, you can see it's gonna give us a square. And when you click on the grid for the second time, it's gonna give you a U. This is done in order to show you the direction of the curve, which is really important when you use commands like extrude along a path and a few other commands. And when you click on the grid for the third time, it's gonna give you a point, and any click after that is gonna be a point as well. And as soon as we click on the grid for the fourth time, you're gonna see it's gonna give us a curve. Now this kind of works the same way as your subdivision works. It's gonna calculate the cage and give you a curve with the average curvature. And every click that you make after that, it's gonna continue making that curve. And you can finalize this curve by entering the enter key on your keyboard or going to your move tool. I'm gonna press enter. And if we go into the control vertices of our curve, it's gonna give us the control vertices just the same as we had in our circular curve tool, and you can edit it afterwards from here. And if we go into the hull of our curve, you can see how the points are connected to each other. I'm gonna go into the object mode and delete this curve. And let's move on to the EP curve. And when we select the EP curve and start drawing on our grid, the first click we make on our grid, you can see it's gonna give us this X. As soon as you click on the grid for the second time in the EP curve, unlike the CV curve, it's gonna start creating the curve. And you can continue drawing the curve on your grid by clicking on the grid again and again. And it's gonna continue drawing the curve. And I'm gonna finalize this curve by pressing enter on my keyboard. And in the components of your EP curve, you can also see you have a box and U representing the direction of your curve. And you have your control vertices just like we had in our CV curve, and I'm going to delete this one as well. Now below our CV curve and our EP curve is our Bezier curve tool. Now if you have worked with Illustrator or Photoshop and you have used the pen tool, you are familiar with the Bezier curve here. So let's select the Bezier curve and start drawing. Now when using the Bezier tool, you can click and hold the left mouse button on your grid and drag that out to create this handle, and you can start creating the curve from the get-go. Now the one benefit of using the Bezier curve tool is that you can easily create corners by just tapping your left mouse button on the grid, and it's gonna create corners really easily. And you can use the handle to control the curvature of your path. If we finalize this curve and go into the components of our Bezier tool, you can see we have a fewer options to select from. So let's go back to our control vertices, and you can see you can adjust your handles again from here. And you can edit your Bezier curve just like you could your CV and EP curve. Now let's delete this one as well. And let's take a look at the pencil curve tool. Now this is also works similarly as it works in Photoshop and Illustrator. You can freehand draw a curve. So let's do that. And the software is gonna automatically create the points that are required to follow that path. So if we finalize this and go into our control vertices, you can see it's gonna give us a whole lot of points to work with. But that's also another problem with freehand drawing a curve. You have a lot of resolution that you don't really need. So I don't really use this one as much. So let's get rid of this one as well. And below our pencil tool, you have two tools available to you to create arcs easily. Now if we select our 3-point circular arc tool and click on our grid once and then click on our grid again, and when we click on our grid for the third time, you can see it's gonna give us an arc that follows the orientation of all of our 3 points to create a really smooth arc that you can use. Now you can do the same thing with the 2-point arc. I'm gonna click on our grid once, and when I click on my grid again, it's gonna start making that arc. Now these two tools are really easy ways you can create an arc. Let's get rid of this one as well. So these were your curve tools, and you can create a lot of different shapes by combining these curve tools by different methods that we're gonna discuss in our future lesson. And I'm gonna end this video right here. As always, if you like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, drop a comment. And if you wanna support me directly, the link to my merch store and my Patreon is in the description down below. And I'll see you in the next video.